This episode discusses suicide, the death of a child, and allegations of sexual assault. If any of these topics may be difficult for you to hear, please take care of yourself. If you or someone you know is struggling, you are not alone. In the United States, you can call or text 988 to reach the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. If you are experiencing domestic abuse, the National Domestic Violence Hotline is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at 1-800-799-7233. And if you have experienced sexual assault, RAIN can be reached at 1-800-656-4673. We also want to be clear about how we're approaching this case. The information in this episode is drawn from publicly available news reports, court records, autopsy reports, official statements, and books published about this case. Where allegations or theories are presented, we will identify the source. Adam Shacknai has consistently maintained his innocence and was never criminally charged in connection with this case. The 2018 civil verdict that found him liable for Rebecca's death was vacated as part of a 2019 settlement, and there was never a criminal trial related to Rebecca's death. Statements about specific individuals throughout this episode should be understood as allegations, opinions, or attributed claims from named sources, not as statements of fact by us. Last week, we walked through two tragic deaths. Both incidents happened at the same location, the Spreckels Mansion in Coronado, California, days apart. And it all began on July 11, 2011, when Max fell at the Spreckels Mansion. Investigators said Max, who was 6 years old, 3 feet 9 inches tall, stumbled over the second-floor banister and grabbed hold of a chandelier before falling 9 feet to the ground below. There was a ball and a child's scooter in the area, and police theorized he tripped while he was running. At the time of Max's fall, there were 2 others in the mansion, Rebecca Zahau and her teenage sister, Zina. Rebecca was in a bathroom and didn't witness the fall. That's her account. And Zina says that she was in a different bathroom showering. On July 13, 2011, 2 days later, Rebecca was found naked, bound, and gagged in an apparent suicide hanging, leaving behind words painted on a door in black. She saved him, can you save her? Then 3 days after Rebecca's death, Max passed away at Rady Children's Hospital from his injuries. Today, we are going to walk through the physical evidence, the independent investigations, the civil trial, and what Rebecca's family has been fighting for ever since. I'm Ashley.
I'm Ricky.
And this is Crime Salad. So let's start with the scene where Rebecca was found. So at the scene, investigators, they found a knife with blood all the way around the handle. Investigators determined that she was on her menstrual cycle at the time of her death. And the blood on that knife handle was tested and confirmed to be Rebecca's menstrual blood. At the civil trial, the family's forensic specialist, Lisa DeMayo, testified to this, and she also testified that there was a mark on Rebecca's inner thigh that looked like a transfer stain, the same size and shape as the handle. Now, the official investigation found no evidence of sexual assault. The family's experts disputed that conclusion, and that gap is one of the most contested points in this entire case. And there were multiple knives found in the bedroom. DeMayo also testified at the civil trial that there was a large chef's knife that was found in the guest bedroom with Rebecca's fingerprints on both sides of the blade. But there were no fingerprints at all on the wooden handle. None.
Adam Shacknai told investigators he ran to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and used it to cut Rebecca down. Investigators identified the knife he said he used. His fingerprints were not on it. If his story is true, his prints should be there. The absence is harder to explain than the presence would have been.
So either he was wearing gloves or the knife was wiped. Now, in civil court, Adam testified that he was not wearing gloves, But the search warrant documents describe a pair of black gloves found on a table and a single black latex glove found in a crawl space under the basement stairs. Separately, there was a pair of garden gloves that were found on a living room table. At the civil trial, the sheriff lieutenant testified that each of these items, they were tested in 2011, and one of the garden gloves showed a mixed DNA sample from at least 2 individuals. But the amount was too small to interpret or compare to anyone.
So the result isn't that no one's DNA was found. It's that the DNA that was found was mixed, so the lab said they couldn't use it.
So there was the mixed DNA, and then Lisa DeMeo also testified that Adam Shacknai's fingerprints were found nowhere at the scene. Not on the knives, not on the rope, nowhere. Despite the fact that he was the person who found Rebecca and cut her down. Now, as for the message that was painted on the door, "She saved him, can you save her?" Sheriff Bill Gore described it as not a clear suicide note. Still, investigators considered it as part of the suicide narrative. There was a tube of black paint that was found on the floor with the lid still open. The sheriff's department confirmed black paint was found on a paintbrush, on her hand, on her torso, and on the rope around her neck. And so, investigators, they concluded that Rebecca had removed her clothing and painted the words on the door herself.
And here's something really interesting relating to that. An expert testified the message was likely painted by a person between 5 feet 10 inches and 6 feet tall. Rebecca was 5 feet 3 to 5 feet 4. According to Greer's statement to the jury, Adam Shacknai is 5 feet 11 inches. He falls squarely in that range. Rebecca doesn't even come close.
And there was also a handwriting expert. There was forensic document examiner Mike Wakshaw, and he testified at the civil trial that he compared block print samples from both Rebecca and Adam against the writing on the door. And his conclusion was that the writing more likely came from Adam than from Rebecca. He was careful to call it an indication, not a certainty, because block lettering limits the available comparison points. But a height estimate and an independent handwriting analysis pointing the same direction is not nothing. The family had their own reading of all of this. Rebecca enjoyed painting as a hobby, and she often signed her work. Her siblings even argued that the message didn't match her handwriting at all. Her ex-husband even said the wording itself didn't sound like something Rebecca would write. Then there was the question of how she went over the balcony. The sheriff's department said only Rebecca's toe and heel prints were on the balcony floor, consistent with her foot size and a person leaning forward over the railing. They also said the disturbances in the dust on the railing matched the width of her torso and the rope. There was a male boot print that was found on the balcony, but investigators traced it to one of the responding officers, who later testified he did leave it. And so the sheriff's conclusion was that Rebecca had stepped onto the balcony herself and taken her own life.
So here's what bothers a lot of people about the suicide ruling. On that balcony, investigators found a toe print and a heel print, not a clear set of footprints, not a walking path, a toe print and a heel print. You're not even standing on your own 2 feet with evidence like that. And remember, her ankles were bound. The autopsy says they could be separated a maximum of 2 inches.
Right. She would have had to shuffle or hop with her hands tied behind her back and then get herself up and over the railing. Now, the sheriff's department, they say that the prints are consistent with her leaning over the railing on her own, but the footprints don't show that. The family's experts said she didn't go over the way the sheriff thinks she did. There was an oxygen reenactment using a dummy with the same bed, the same carpeting, and in their version, the bed moved about 20 inches after the drop. Police evidence said that it moved 7 inches. That's a pretty big difference. Pathologist Cyril Wecht and cold case investigator Paul Holes raised the same concern about her neck. A 9-foot drop with the rope tied off at the bed should have produced significant trauma to the cervical vertebrae. Holes called it a long drop, the kind of force where you would expect devastating injury or even internal decapitation. Rebecca had a fractured hyoid bone and minor cartilage damage, but no injury to the vertebrae.
The hyoid is a U-shaped bone in the front of the neck. A fracture there is more commonly associated with manual strangulation than with hanging. It can happen in a hanging, but a 9-foot drop with no other damage is a hard combination to explain.
Weck's conclusions was that Rebecca had been strangled before she went over, and that her body was actually lowered, not dropped. Two completely different theories of the same body hanging from the same rope. The autopsy also revealed 4 contusions on the top of the head, described medically as subgaleal hemorrhages, meaning bruises between the scalp and the skull, the kind of injury that is caused by blunt impact, her head striking something or something striking her head. At the civil trial, Greer argued that those 4 blows had rendered Rebecca partially or fully unconscious before she was ever hanged.
Cyril Wecht put it plainly after reviewing the autopsy. He said, "We are talking about contusions on the top of the head. So even as the body is falling down, let's say there are branches, how do you get bruises on the top of your head as the body is falling vertically downward?" His point is that a falling body produces contact injuries on the sides and front, not the top.
So let's talk about the bindings. It's a big one. There was reenactment after reenactment that was demonstrated to explain how someone could bind their own wrists behind their back. The theory is that she would have tied her hands in front of her body first. Then she would slip one hand out while keeping the loops intact, move both of her hands behind her back, slide her free hand back in, and they released a video of this process to support their findings. And even with all of that, people were not convinced.
And I've looked at the images. The knot configuration on Rebecca's wrists, they don't match what you would expect to see if someone tied their own hands behind their back from scratch. And the statistics back that up. Studies on suicide by hanging show that cases where hands were tied behind their back represent roughly 0.5% of all hanging deaths. So it's not impossible, but it's genuinely rare. And tying your own hands behind your own back, that requires a level of premeditation and dexterity that sits very uncomfortably next to the theory that she was acting out of sudden, overwhelming guilt.
And she apparently also knotted a long-sleeved shirt around her neck and gagged herself with the bottom portion of the shirt. And this would have had to have happened before she tied her hands behind her back. And the investigators' own timeline asks us to believe all of this happened out of guilt for Max's accident 2 days earlier.
But the problem there is that Max was still alive when she died.
So here's another thing. This got buried and almost nobody talks about it. When CBS 8 and ABC News obtained the full autopsy report in September of 2011, they found a detail that had never been mentioned at the sheriff's press conference or at trial or anything. There was tape residue on both of Rebecca's legs.
The kind of mark left behind by something like duct tape that was applied and then removed, which is suspicious.
It is, because investigators, they said Rebecca used rope to bind her feet. That's the official story, and the tape's never mentioned. So the question nobody got a clean answer to is, why is there tape residue on her legs at all? Where did it come from, and where did the tape go?
Cyril Wecht laid out the only 2 things that made sense. One, she planned to tape her own feet, changed her mind, and then switched the rope, and then removed the tape herself. In which case, where is the tape? Because it was never found at the scene.
And option 2?
Well, someone else applied the tape to her legs while subduing her, and then removed it before staging the scene. Those are the options. There's really no third option that accounts for tape residue and no tape.
Yeah, the tape thing is really weird. It's a big mystery. CBS 8 had to obtain the autopsy to find this information. Either it was considered and dismissed without explanation, or it was never fully investigated. Either way, the family never got an answer on it. Both Rebecca's death and the tragic death of 6-year-old Max Shacknai quickly drew intense public and media attention. The story spread far beyond California, reaching audiences in New Zealand, Finland, Spain, and the United Kingdom. As investigators stood by their ruling of suicide, outside voices began to speak up. There were writers from Forbes, including true crime author Kathy Scott and the attorney Victoria Pichon. They openly questioned the conclusions of the investigation. Pichon went as far as to call the ruling an embarrassing public blunder, but not everyone agreed. Trial attorney Roy Black published a column in the Daily Beast, pushing back against theories of foul play. He said, "How could anyone do all of this without leaving behind a scintilla of microscopic evidence?" He argued they would have had to wear a full rubber suit and levitate over the scene, and he urged the media to stop calling it a murder.
I get that he's trying to make a point, but bringing up a rubber suit or a space suit, is that sarcasm? But to add to his point, it is strange because other people had been in and around that house days before. Adam, Zena, Max, Jonah, and the only DNA at the scene was Rebecca's. Adam's DNA wasn't on the knife that he said he used to cut her down. How is that even possible? Either the scene was incredibly clean for a murder, or it was incredibly clean for a suicide, or evidence was tampered with. Something is up here.
Law enforcement stood firm on their conclusions. After meeting with Rebecca's sister Mary and her husband in Missouri to walk through their findings, Sheriff Bill Gore said it was unfortunate that they couldn't accept the results. While the family was speaking publicly, grieving, trying to wrap their heads around what actually happened, Jonah Shacknai was managing his own battle with the media. Within a week of the deaths, he hired the public relations from Sitrick and Company, which specializes in crisis management and corporate reputation. They are known for high-profile clientele, advising companies, executives, and individuals facing legal, financial, and reputational challenges. And Medicis itself was no stranger to that kind of press. The company had previously faced high-profile lawsuits involving patients who developed drug-induced lupus and hepatitis, eventually leading to rulings that the company could be held liable for failing to warn customers. According to the statement from the firm, the goal in Jonah's personal case was to handle the overwhelming number of media inquiries, allowing Jonah time to grieve and make funeral arrangements. Behind the scenes, the firm was also engaging with journalists, challenging reports they believed contained inaccuracies. So while the family was pushing for answers publicly, this was all happening too.
One thing to keep in mind, this is a tragedy all around. The point here isn't to say if Jonah was grieving or not. Of course he was. His son just tragically died. It's sad. But there is something here that's hard to ignore. You have one side of the family that's trying to wrap their head around losing Rebecca, and the other side has a crisis PR firm managing the story within a week. Most grieving people are not thinking about narrative control. And the people who are usually people who understand that something could become a very big problem. And I'm not saying what that something is. I'm just saying that the instinct itself is probably worth noting.
After the official ruling, Rebecca's family wasn't done. They launched a website called justiceforrebecca.org and started raising money for their own investigation. And Rebecca's sister, Mary, she went on NBC's Today Show to publicly call for a state-level review. Jonah Shacknai also took action. It was in September of 2011 when he wrote a letter to California Attorney General Kamala Harris asking for an independent review. He said he didn't personally doubt the suicide finding, but he wanted to give clarity to those who did. That request was actually denied the next day. Chief Assistant Attorney General Dane Gillette said that the office only stepped in under narrow circumstances. Public speculation wasn't one of them. Meanwhile, investigators, they ran a second analysis on Rebecca's phone using newer technology. By early October, they confirmed nothing new had been found.
It's interesting that they're looking at her phone again. We covered this in part 1, but there was a voicemail police say Jonah left, and Jonah confirms that it was him. According to the phone records, someone listened to a 2-minute message at 12:50 a.m. on July 13th. Jonah says he was calling to tell Rebecca that Max had taken a turn and that he might not make it. So what's interesting, though, is that voicemail was deleted. There's no record of the message itself, and there was a witness near the mansion who came forward saying that she heard a woman screaming around 11:30 p.m. Now, according to that timeline, that would be before that call.
So while Rebecca's family was fighting one ruling, Max's mother, Dina Shacknai, was quietly fighting another. According to a 2012 write-up in Arizona Foothills magazine, Dina is a clinical psychologist by training, and she used that background to dig into the inconsistencies in her son's death. And there's a quote of hers from a 2012 NBC News interview that lands hard. She said, quote, "He was such a beautiful, generous child." And she also shared that Max's organs were donated. His liver saved an infant, and his kidneys went to 2 adults.
3 other people today are alive because of Max.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool that she shared that. On July 16th, 2012, this is 1 year after Max died, Dina held a press conference in Phoenix with her attorney, Angela Hallier. She had spent 9 months running her own investigation. She hired 2 experts, forensic pathologist Dr. Judy Melinek from the San Francisco office of the chief medical examiner, and biomechanics expert Dr. Robert T. Bovey Jr. from the engineering firm Exponent. And both concluded the accidental fall theory could not explain Max's injuries.
Biomechanics is basically the physics of bodies. So one expert's reading the body, the other's reading the scene. They land pretty much in the same place.
Dr. Melanek's words in her formal report were direct. She said, quote, "It would be more accurate to certify Max's death as a homicide, where homicide is defined as death at the hands of another." And her findings went beyond a general, "this wasn't an accident." She concluded Max's injuries existed on multiple planes. According to Hallier, in the August 2012 PR Newswire release, an assault scenario was the only one that, quote, "accounts for the multiple planes of injuries on Max's body and the scene findings."
A simple fall hits one surface, the floor. Multiple planes means that he hit multiple things, which usually means that he was moved.
Melinek also flagged the biomechanics. She told Fox News, quote, "He's got too much injury for just a simple fall from the railing." She added that Max's center of gravity was too low for him to have flipped over the banister himself. She went on to say that it doesn't make any sense and it defies gravity.
So a pathologist saying that the official story violates physics for a 6-year-old.
NBC News also reported on the back injuries, describing them as patterned.
Pattern just means that the injury carries the imprint of a specific object, like a railing edge. You don't usually see that in a clean accidental fall.
And there's one detail in Melanek's report that hits harder than the rest. So Rebecca told investigators that before Max became completely unresponsive, he said the dog's name, Ocean. According to Dr. Melinek, given Max's injuries, that statement would have been medically impossible. Dina's team also surfaced procedural problems. According to her August 2012 release, she didn't get Coronado's PD biomechanics report from their own expert, Dr. Mark A. Gomez, until 3 weeks after the September 2nd, 2011 multi-agency press conference. The official ruling of accident had already been announced publicly, and the family hadn't even seen the analysis behind it.
Conclusion first and then evidence later. That seems backwards.
And it got worse. According to her September 2012 release, Commander Lawton of the Coronado Police Department later acknowledged to Dina that the diagram presented at the September 2nd press conference, the one showing how a 6-year-old went over the railing, used, quote, "an inaccurate scaling of Max's frame to that of the staircase."
The picture they showed the public wasn't even to scale.
And when Dina's team submitted their experts' findings, Coronado PD never shared that evidence with Dr. Gomez, the original biomechanics expert. Their entire ruling was built on his analysis. He was never asked whether the new findings changed his mind. Now, it's worth noting here that Dina's view on Rebecca has evolved. Her experts originally said the findings supported Rebecca's direct involvement. However, by 2018, in an interview with Town & Country, Dina stepped back from that. She said, quote, "I don't have reason to believe that Rebecca killed Max." And she told the magazine how now she thinks someone else may have entered the house. What would have been Max's 7th birthday, Jonas Shacknai launched a nonprofit called Max in Motion. It provides scholarships for financially disadvantaged Arizona kids to play youth sports. Soccer mainly, since that was Max's sport.
According to a 2012 Phoenix magazine profile, Dina says that she wasn't asked to be a part of it. She found out through a one-line text the day before the launch. So she went and started her own foundation in Max's name, Maxie's House.
Now, to be clear, Max's death has never been investigated as a homicide, despite everything. The trauma doctor's concerns at the hospital from the very beginning, the CPS probe, Dr. Melineck's homicide findings, Dr. Bovey's biomechanics analysis, the procedural problems. The case has never been reopened. As far as Rebecca's family, they had been working with their own legal teams since the fall of 2011, and they hired Seattle attorney Ann Bremmer.
Bremner's one of the most recognizable trial attorneys in the country. Civil rights, criminal defense, catastrophic loss. She's who you bring in when you want a story to stop being ignored.
Now, she publicly criticized the medical examiner's conclusions, calling them unprecedented. She told ABC News there had never been a reported female suicide that looked like this. To her, given everything we walked through the last episode, the ruling was ridiculous on its face. And her comments sparked pushback. Chicago attorney Dan Webb, representing Jonas Shacknai at the same time, sent Bremmer a cease and desist letter. He warned that her statements were defamatory. He said that she was implying Jonah used his wealth to interfere with the investigation.
So this is basically a Chicago heavyweight telling her to back off or get sued.
Now, the warning didn't go any further. Filing the actual lawsuit would have just brought in more attention to the case. In July of 2013, on the 2-year anniversary of Rebecca's death, her family filed a wrongful death lawsuit, initially seeking $10 million in damages. They named 3 defendants, Adam Shacknai, Dina Shacknai, and Dina's twin sister, Nina Romano. Jonah Shacknai was not named. By 2017, the family's attorney, Keith Greer, had already dropped Nina from the case. A witness had backed up her claim that she'd never been inside the mansion. And in April of that same year, after Rady Children's Hospital's security footage placed Dina at her son's bedside the night Rebecca died, Greer dropped her too. And he actually apologized to both sisters publicly during a press conference. That left one defendant, Adam Shacknai. Now, before we go any further, just to remind you, this was a civil trial. This was not a criminal trial. They have 2 completely different sets of rules.
A different burden of proof. In a criminal trial, the prosecution has to prove the defendant did it beyond a reasonable doubt. That's the highest standard we have, because you're talking about someone taking someone else's freedom away.
In a civil trial, the bar is way lower. It's called preponderance of the evidence. All the plaintiff has to do is convince the jury it's more likely than not. If the jury thinks there is a 50.1% chance that the plaintiff's right, they win.
It's the difference between yes, I'm sure, and yes, I think so.
And the stakes are different. Criminal, your freedom. Civil, money. The system isn't trying to lock anyone up. It's trying to figure out who pays.
Which is why the same set of facts can end up in 2 different places. Adam was never criminally charged. The sheriff still calls it a suicide. But in civil court, the family only had to tip the scales slightly, and they did that.
Now, there's a piece of background about Adam that we mentioned in part 1 at the very end. He was a tugboat captain on the Mississippi River since the late 90s.
Tugboat captains tie knots all day. That's the job.
So this 2018 civil trial, it turned into a full-on knot fight. The family's attorney, Keith Greer, brought in a non-expert named Lindsay Philpott, a former charter boat captain. And he testified that the knots on Rebecca were overhand knots in a clove hitch, common nautical knots.
Which lines up with Adam's day job. That was the whole point.
Adam's defense team brought in their own knot expert, Robert Crisnall. Crisnall has written peer-reviewed papers on knots and trains law enforcement on them. He said Philpott misidentified the knots on Rebecca's ankles, wrists, neck, and the bedpost. He testified the knots were consistent with what he sees in suicide cases. And he demonstrated it right there in the courtroom, tied his own wrists together using the same knots, slipped one hand out, moved his hands behind his back, slipped his hand back in.
And that kind of in-court demo sticks with a jury.
Yeah, definitely. They're given a visual of this demonstration of how this knot was tied. Like, yeah, see how easy it was? I could do it. That's what she did. But the family side had its own observation. Forensic criminologist Paul Holes looked at the case for the Oxygen series Death at the Mansion, and he noticed something specific. On Rebecca's hands, there's a figure 8 worked into the binding. In the police photo, that figure 8 sits at the top of the loops. In the sheriff's reenactment video, the figure 8 ends up at the bottom.
And that difference matters. The figure 8 at the bottom, you can work the rope. You can move your hands. A figure 8 at the top, the way that it was on Rebecca, you can't do that. Meaning
the sheriff's demonstration used the easier version, not the one that Rebecca would have actually had to perform. In April of 2018, almost 7 years after Rebecca's death, the jury reached a decision. They found Adam Shacknai responsible. They awarded the family roughly $5.2 million. Adam's legal team rejected the verdict hard. Dan Webb, now representing Adam directly, said that he was absolutely astonished. He called the accusations false and unsupported by credible evidence. Within 2 weeks, the San Diego County Sheriff's Department reopened the case for review. New investigators, not the ones who worked on it in 2011, they re-examined the evidence and resubmitted it to the medical examiner. By November of 2018, the conclusion was the same: suicide. The family pushed back hard. A public PR campaign accusing officials of ignoring critical evidence. Investigators noted that the family hadn't actually submitted their civil trial evidence to the review. Adam was meanwhile fighting the verdict. He'd vowed to appeal. But in February of 2019, before the appeal could be fully argued, his insurance company stepped in and settled with the Zahau family for $600,000. So not $5.2 million. And here's the part that most people miss. Adam wasn't consulted. His insurance company decided that they were done paying his legal bills and cut the check. He was publicly furious and said that the system failed him. Once the settlement was accepted, the case was dismissed with prejudice. That means the court has made a final determination, and the plaintiff is forever barred from filing the same lawsuit again. The $5.2 million verdict was vacated. Adam has consistently maintained his innocence. So the family won, and then the system erased the win. So in the years that followed, Mary became the public voice of who Rebecca actually was. Not the suicide narrative, not the headline, her sister. Mary said Rebecca was deeply committed to family. She supported their parents because she'd promised them that she and her sister would never let them struggle the way they did growing up. And Mary believes that losing Rebecca contributed to their father dying 2 years later. Basically a broken heart that just gave out. Mary has talked publicly about a conversation she and Rebecca had the night before. Rebecca was making plans for the next day. She was taking items to the Rady Children's Hospital for Jonah while he stayed with Max. She told Mary to let their mother know that she would call her on her way to the hospital and she would be texting throughout the day. I think to the family's point, if you're planning to take your own life, you don't plan for tomorrow. In 2022, the family submitted a formal petition to the San Diego Medical Examiner's Office. They couldn't sue the Shackneys, but they could still push for the official ruling to be corrected. After staff pathologist and medical examiner who originally worked on the case reviewed it again, Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Stephen Campman responded in September of 2023. In his letter, he said, quote, "After reviewing the totality of the evidence, the conclusion has not changed."
So now 2 reviews, same answer. Officially still suicide.
I gotta admit, this would be a very frustrating place to be in if I were involved in Rebecca's family. It would be absolutely frustrating. In March of 2025, Mary released a book called Unraveling the Knots. Nearly 300 pages, 25 chapters, autopsy reports, court transcripts, never-before-seen photos. And in it, she accuses the San Diego County Sheriff's Department of corruption and lays out specific evidence she believes was ignored.
So one example, Mary says there's a partial male fingerprint that was never fully pursued. With today's technology, she wants it retested.
In the book, she also mentions a dryer sheet, which is really interesting because they never bring it up in any evidence that was collected. Dryer sheets are sometimes used to remove fingerprints.
And the fact that we even as a culture know that dryer sheets get used to wipe down prints is just one of those true crime brain things that we all have.
Right. And once you learn that, it's something that you just can't unlearn. And the second you hear it, you start asking, why was there a loose dryer sheet in a guest bedroom? I mean, I guess when I'm doing laundry, sometimes the laundry sheet goes like flying under the bed, but still.
So dryer sheets leave chemical residue and synthetic fibers. If a scene's been wiped down with one, you'd expect to see signs of that, which would be evidence of someone cleaning the scene on purpose.
My guess on whether investigators tested for any of that back in 2011, probably not. And I don't want to give too much of the book away, but she even describes a new witness who came forward in 2023 who heard argumentative commotion coming from the mansion that night. It's really a book that you should totally check out. Now, Mary is not the only person pushing back. In 2021, investigative journalist Caitlin Rother published Death on Ocean Boulevard inside the Coronado Mansion case. Rother spent roughly a decade on the case, 8 separate 2-hour interviews with Jonah Shackney, and she told NBC7 that she couldn't definitively say whether Rebecca's death was a suicide or a murder, but she did publicly conclude the scene was staged, either as a suicide meant to look like a murder or a murder meant to look like a suicide. So at this point, you've got a surviving sister with a book, an independent journalist with a book, the original civil jury that found Adam responsible before the verdict was vacated, and Max's mother separately disputing the accident ruling on her son.
And that's a lot of serious people asking the same questions for over a decade.
Now, even with the civil settlement, Mary has said that her family has never cared about the money. They knew it wouldn't bring Rebecca back. What she wants from Adam Shackney is a confession. She has said publicly that confessing would give him peace, give him forgiveness, and give her family closure. From the system, she wants 2 things. She wants the medical examiner to at least change the manner of death to undetermined, and she wants the current sheriff to hand the case over to the FBI or another agency for a full independent investigation.
A recent statement from the sheriff's office said their sympathies continue to go out to everyone affected by Rebecca's passing. And at this time, there's no new information that would lead them to reopen.
The family is still actively pursuing legal action. This is a difficult case to take in. I mean, there's so many different moving parts. Rebecca's death, Max's death, 2 families, 2 rulings, same mansion, 2 days apart. There's a lot here. If you want to support the fight for Rebecca to receive a fair investigation, make sure you follow the Justice for Rebecca Zahau Facebook page. There's lots of information on there. And check out Mary's book, Unraveling the Knots. It's available on Amazon and at Barnes & Noble. We encourage you to read it, hear Mary's story directly, and if you want a journalist's deep dive alongside the family's account, Caitlin Rother's Death on Ocean Boulevard is also out there. But for now, thank you so much for listening to Crime Salad. This is the completion and part 2 of the Rebecca Zahau case. Thank you so much for listening. We will see you next time.